describing the disaster unfolding still in the Gulf of Mexico, the 11 people killed, the untold damage to the environment and people's livelihoods. The term doomsday scenario is not far off. Our third story, what then is the next step worse than doomsday? As forecast here 2 weeks ago, evidence now of the possibility that something called an underground blowout might be happening. Oil seeping outside BP's damaged well through the ocean floor. That new information coming from Senator Bill Nelson of Florida, referencing fears he addressed in a letter to BP.
Andrea, we're looking into something new right now, that there's reports of oil that's seeping up from the seabed, which would indicate, if that's true, that the well casing itself is actually pierced underneath the seabed.
That said, obviously, to Andrea Mitchell on this network. Last week, the Washington Post reported sources at companies involved with the well said that BP discovered damage inside the well below the seafloor during the initial top kill procedure that failed the failed measure to plug the leak with mud. A BP official, speaking on condition of anonymity, had told the newspaper that, quote, "We discovered things that were broken in the subsurface, and that the mud being pushed into the well to prevent oil from coming out was making it out to the side, into the formation." The formation is their term for the rock surrounding the well. The fear is that now oil is making it out to the side into the rock formation, and that any further attempts to contain the spill will pressurize the already damaged well below the seafloor, causing an underground blowout. And if that were to happen, subsea containment of the spill would get exponentially more difficult. Try to translate that. We'll once again turn to oil and gas industry expert and veteran Bob Kavnar, the contributor to the Huffington Post, as well as founder and editor of the Daily Hurricane blog. Bob, thanks again for your time tonight.
You bet, Keith.
All right, you've had your own fears about underground blowouts. You think BP and the federal government are as fully afraid of it as you are?
I certainly hope that they are. These stories that are coming out now, the one in the New York Times and the Washington Post that you talked about, square with what I heard last week from those who were closer to the operation, that they experienced some kind of a failure during the top kill operation, and that's one of the reasons they shut down so quickly. You'll recall the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, they said it would be 48 hours more before they heard if it was successful, and then they suddenly announced that afternoon that they were shutting down the operation. We do know that their biggest problem here right now is keeping the well flowing, since I believe they probably can't shut it in for the fear of an underground blowout. So they've got to keep oil coming to the surface, and they overran the capacity of the Enterprise yesterday. So the idea of bringing another ship in that can take the rest of the flow and put a new cap on by Tuesday sounds pretty ambitious to me.
Is it possible there's already been underground blowout or blowouts and BP doesn't know it or isn't telling us? And is there anything that you've seen in terms of what they're doing there that makes you believe that's a possibility or is not a possibility? What
tells me is that they have a downhole problem is that they're working to fit a cap that latches onto the top of the blowout preventer rather than just setting a new blowout preventer. And so that means they can't shut the well in because of pressure buildup, and so they have to keep the well flowing to minimize oil and gas going out into the formation on the side.
Senator Nelson talked about reports of oil seeping through the seabed, and there have been rumors about that on the internet for at least 2 weeks, and you saw what you saw when they tried the top kill and the mud came back out the way it did.
Right.
Do we know if it's true, or is this still at the rumor stage?
I certainly would like BP to just come out and say what they think. This subsurface failure that's been talked about several times, I would believe they need to address.
I think it's important that we don't get ahead of ourselves here. You know, one of the problems with having this camera down there is that when the oil stops gushing, everybody feels like we're done, and we're not. The new cap is containing the oil right now, but scientists are doing a number of tests. What they want to make sure of is that by putting this cap on, the oil isn't seeping out elsewhere in ways that could be even more catastrophic, and that involves measuring pressures while this cap is on. The data is not all still in, and it has to be interpreted by the scientists. But here's the good news that I think everybody needs to understand. Even if it turns out that we can't maintain this cap and completely shut off the flow of oil, what the new cap allows us to do is to essentially attach many more containment mechanisms so that we're able to take more oil up to the surface, put it on ships, it won't be spilling into the Gulf. The final solution to this whole problem is going to be the relief wells and getting that completed. But there's no doubt that we have made progress as a consequence of this new cap fitting on, and that even if it turns out that we can't keep the containment cap on to completely stop the oil, it's going to allow us to capture much more oil.
We are in the first process of moving to the ability to control the oil leakage. As you know, during this last weekend, we tried the top kill exercise. There were 3 different top kill attempts made in 3 consecutive days. 30,000 barrels of mud was placed down the well bore, unsuccessful at overcoming the pressure of the hydrocarbons coming up through the well bore. As a result of that, we've gone to oil containment rather than capping the well. So after that, the goal will be then to take the oil that's coming up from the wellbore, take it to the surface and actually produce it. That'll be to flare off the natural gas and go ahead and produce the oil and transfer it ashore either by tanker or barge. We're going to be producing oil out of this well at a low rate, but that's the way we're going to relieve the pressure that's currently there. That means that we're going to have a way to consider heavy weather, hurricane weather, and what to do about that. There's a couple of options that are underway right now that would include a floating production facility that could easily be separated and moved off station should we get violent weather during the hurricane season.
So we need to remember where we are at the end of June. We've got the one freestanding riser. We've got the LMR PCAP sitting on top, and then we've got the Q4000 collecting, 10,000 barrels a day. So as we start to move forward, we'll need to take the LMR PCAP off and put the sealing valve on top of the LMRP of the existing well. And while we're in that process, we'll continue to run the Helix producer through the initially installed freestanding riser and also through the Q4000. And once we put the capping valve in place, we'll be able to take additional oil and gas to the Discover Enterprise, which will have changed over from the LMR PCAP to just using drill piping connecting into the capping valve. And we're also bringing another vessel, the Clear Leader, which will connect to the other side of the valve. So we'll have, you can see, they're sort of twin collection vessels. And so that will add another 20 to 30,000 barrels a day.
First of all, we want to know what the flow rate is. And early on, as you know, there was a lot of talk, 1,000, 5,000 barrels a day, way low. We finally impaneled a government team to take a look at flow rate, and we finally settled on 53,000 barrels a day, plus or minus 10%. If you think that's a valid estimate of flow rate, then you can say, well, how much total was released? It's about 4.9 million barrels.
Enterprise-class drill ships are revolutionizing offshore drilling with dual activity. 2 rigs in 1 derrick. Dual activity drilling reduces deep water well construction time and costs by re-engineering the way offshore drilling is done. Here, everything from the 4 knuckle boom cranes to the dual pipe racking systems to the dual rotary tables systematically work in water more than a mile deep. The power of dual activity centers around the rig's ability to make up and trip tubulars while simultaneously running the blowout preventer or making up casing. The rig can even help install subsea infrastructure. Backlaying or J-laying pipeline from a conventional rig takes a pipe-laying barge, which has to be scheduled, delivered, and paid for. But the Enterprise-class rig's second drilling station can be used to lay subsea systems, saving as much money or more than the rig's own day rate. Bottom line, dual activity adds up to savings for operators, faster production of large fields anywhere in the world, and a new benchmark in offshore drilling efficiency. Transocean, setting the standard in deep water drilling. Bottom line, dual activity adds up to savings for operators, faster production of large fields anywhere in the world, and a new benchmark in offshore drilling efficiency.
We were made to be courageous. We were made to lead the way. We could be the generation that finally breaks the chains. We were made to be courageous.
Big crises happen. It forces us to do some soul searching. And I think that's important for all of us to do. In the meantime, my job is to get this fixed. And in case anybody wonders, in any of your reporting, in case you're wondering who's responsible, I take responsibility. It is my job to make sure that everything is done to shut this down. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to happen right away or the way I'd like it to happen. It doesn't mean that we're not going to make mistakes. But there shouldn't be any confusion here. The federal government is fully engaged, and I'm fully engaged.